Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 o'clock. Thank you for coming to the October NASAAEP meeting. This month we have an opportunity to listen to a panel of respondents from the IDA. It's going to be led by Eric Thompson from Code 3. Really appreciate everybody taking their time, and just so everybody is aware, today's meeting is being recorded. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I think we've given everybody a little bit more time. We'll have additional participants jumping in. I'm sure as we get going for the day, we're going to try to keep this best we can to an hour. Thank you, Aaron, for hosting this today. And with us today, we're going to let's get a few squirrels with you today. We're going to talk a little bit about things going on surrounding Hurricane Ida. Not going to be a full after action report. We're just going to hit some highlights and some of the things that were under consideration as we continue to work in some of the recovery efforts at Hurricane Ida. And so with us today, we've got Beth Edcock from Mississippi. We've got Robbie Everett from Louisiana. We've got Denise Bash from Greater Good. With any hopes, we'll have Josh Carey from American Humane and Shannon Melitis from IFAW joining us also. If they're unable to join us, I'll try to give some of the field perspective from the Code 3 and ASAR point of views as we worked in cooperation with our state partners. So as we get going today, if you have questions, go ahead and put them into the chat. Both Aaron and I will be trying to monitor chat as we go along. Otherwise, we'll kind of go through a natural progression of how we all came together in the different phases of Hurricane Ida. And I'm going to throw Beth and Robbie under the bus right away as we start to talk about pre-event preparedness at the state level. And Beth, I'm going to start with you over in Mississippi. And can you kind of guide us through at what point did your ESF really start to get busy? As it started 48 hours out from the storm? Does it start at 24 hours out at the storm? And give me some of the considerations that you're working on when you're dealing with the storm coming in.
Okay, sure. Hi. I'm glad to be on the call. Yes, Bridget is not on the call today. She had to be on another call. But anyway, I would say at least 48 hours before we were making plans and looking at our plans. And Bridget's being calm, and I normally cry, but that's the way things go for us. I know that's terrible. I'm not a good emergency management person as far as my emotions. I seem to cry a lot. But anyway, yes. So we got, it came at a time when our state vet was out of state, our finance person was out of state, our emergency coordinator had left us in July, so we didn't have that person. So it was actually Bridget and myself who were, trying to get everything together for this, for Ida. And we, as our ESF 11, we are with the Department of Ag and Commerce. We're two separate agencies within our state, but we both handle ESF 11. So we work very closely with them. And we basically, looked at our plans, looked at what we what the weather was saying, and we found that I'm sorry, my dog is jumping all around. Um, we found that on the onset, it was a very odd disaster for us. We were not getting a lot of calls from the state to start with, I mean, from the counties to start with. Um, they seem to be more resilient than they have in the past. Normally, with a hurricane of this nature, we would be getting calls right off the bat. And we got some, but nothing like we did previously. So I would say we just, um, we were activated with MEMA and we're getting set and we were praying for it not to land in Mississippi. I'm sorry, Louisiana.
Right. And I think that that brings up a lot of great considerations of what activities are going on pre-event. So when you say you didn't get the amount of calls that you usually received, what traditionally are the types of calls do you receive? Is it more for help us evacuate or help us locate additional resources? What are your traditional calls for service?
Usually, with a storm of this magnitude, the Red Cross would set up a mega shelter at our state fairgrounds in the Coliseum. And when they do that, the Board of Animal Health is in charge of running a state animal shelter to support the evacuees in that shelter. Because of COVID, Red Cross did not set up that shelter. So that was something that um, we did not have to take on that huge task to start with. But normally the counties would be calling us for, a storm is coming. How are you going to help us, as in the state, take care of these animals and shelter pets? And we did not have those calls. We saw, we talked with them. We saw that 7 shelters, human shelters in the lower 6 counties were pet friendly. They deemed them pet friendly, but they were going to be operated by Red Cross, even though they were county shelters. And so normally they would be expecting us to come do something for them, and this time they seemed to have that set of where they were going to put the pets. I think our biggest concern, or not our biggest concern, our biggest challenge with this is communication as far as the number of animals that were in the shelters, that the pet friendly shelters. We did not get good numbers. We didn't. The Red Cross doesn't track those numbers, and the county didn't track those numbers. So that's something we're looking at in the future of how we can solve that problem of finding out exactly how many animals were in those shelters and their needs. We did get a call from, we support the health department in their special needs shelter, and we did get a call from them to house some cats for some of the residents in their shelter. But we have an MOU with a local vet clinic that houses the animals that is right there beside that special medical needs shelter. So that's kind of what we had going on.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Robbie, I'm going to throw it over to you next. Robbie, for Louisiana, this is just another day and another thunderstorm rolling in, given the frequency that you guys are engaged. But your pre-event started, 72 hours out or better. But as you got closer to landfall, did things get more critical, or how does that change your strategy and your pre-event planning and actions?
Yes, we did have to pivot. I love that word now. But, our incident commander and assistant commissioner had retired. So it was a whole new team and a different philosophy when we showed up here Thursday to discuss what our actions would be for the storm. And thankfully, the governor and GOSEF and all the other state agencies had already pre-established that anyone needing to leave the parishes pre-storm would be taken to a mega shelter or to their point-to-point shelters. Point-to-point, if you're not familiar, that's where a parish has a contract with another parish to take its people and its pets. So we've worked really hard to go with that decision that we were just going to go there just to be out of harm's way in the mega shelters. So LDAF stood up 5 shelters. DCI was one of them with our medical special needs shelter. And then the other 4 are regionally set and co-located with the CTN population with DCFS. That's the Department of Child and Family Services. So on Thursday, we kind of had a game plan. We knew what the governor was going to do. So by Friday, we contacted Lessard, our partner, activated their MOU, assessed what our potential needs would be, and then, discussed the fact that they would be going to the mega shelters first, spend the night, and as soon as it was safe, then they would be moved or transitioned to better sheltering or Red Cross sheltering or their point-to-point sheltering. So when I sat down with the commissioner and our new assistant commissioner, we've all decided that we would just stay our course, make sure that we had enough supplies available for the parishes if they needed them in their localized sheltering. And then I think it was Friday, the commissioner said, is there anything else you need? And I said, I think we need to activate our MOUs with our national partners, give them a chance to start heading this way. And so he gave me the green light to do that, and that was a turning point for us because people weren't leaving. The parish pickup points weren't full. We had to send transportation resources down there pre-storm to Calcasieu and other parishes that were going to be in the line of fire, and people weren't leaving. I mean, we sheltered right at 100 pets in 5 shelters, which is really an significantly low number of pets. And so we found that most of the people were going to shelter at home in their parish, and that would put some pressure on our local animal controls. But fortunately for us, with the help of Lessard, they send out a survey to all the animal controls. We contact all the animal controls in the infected parishes and ask them to please decompress their shelters. So for the first couple of days before the storm and up to the storm itself, our parish animal controls were emptying their shelters, finding transports for their animals. And that's a part of our plan. We encourage that at all our meetings. We talk with animal control to decompress their shelters. And the benefit to that is that it frees up their staff to support their own citizens. It gives us and the parishes a place to take animals that need to be boarded or sheltered during in parish sheltering. So I guess that's kind of what we were looking at. Pre-storm, 48 hours out, we activated, like I said, all our MOUs. And when we did that, it was like a sense of calm because we knew no matter what happened, we would have resources either here at our complex or close by to support anything that would happen. So I guess that's about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
No, and a big kudos to your decision-making process, and it's great to hear how you actually came to the decision of when do you pull the trigger on additional outside support. And for you, it was activating a few of the national groups, and with Code 3 and ASAR and IFAW and ASPCA all working with you individually, but actually, since we're NARS partners, we're used to working with each other. It's a great cohesive resource to bring in a lot of people in a short amount of time. And from the NGO side of points, and Denise, I'm going to engage you here as we talk about, we've heard a little bit from Beth and Robbie about what the government partners are doing, but on the non-governmental organization or the NGO side, we've got a whole host of activities going on that really does try to support exactly what Robbie was talking about, helping to decompress those shelters, getting resources placed for possible use, and logistically getting prepared. Can you talk a little bit about how Greater Good, when they activated when Ida was coming on, and what kind of calls you were getting from the potential impact zones?
Sure, absolutely. For us, it's pretty typical that the first thing we're going to hear from everybody is we want to pre-evacuate. And that was the primary time that I'd say that we came to the realization that right now COVID is the primary disaster. And so what we found was we were successful to a point, but not like normal because of the slowdown of adoptions throughout the country. It was a bit more difficult, even with multiple teams, national teams, working to get animals out of state. So there was a good evacuation, but I think in normal times it would have been more robust. And then the next thing, of course, is making sure that we'll be working with Renee and Robbie to make sure that we're identifying trucks. And Robbie can speak to this as well. There was major supply chain issues with food in the beginning, and it was something I think everybody should keep in mind moving forward. Is as long as this pandemic is going on and these issues are at hand and relevant, preparation is even more important than ever before. We actually had to fly food in from Texas. It was the first time we've ever had a truck of water commandeered for humans that was meant for animals. So I would say that was my biggest lesson learned, was that this was definitely something difficult when it came to supply chain. We were able to award and work with LSART to deploy a large amount of pharmaceuticals for transport to support our transports and every other national and local transport that was taking place. We found that once the food came in, it was readily available, minus the cat food because of supply chain issues on creating cat food right now. So those are the things that stick to my mind the most. Everything was, quote, normal, except for slower. We did deploy a large amount of something that we call a good pack that seemed to go over very well, and we're still getting some requests for them, which is a backpack filled with supplies for a person that is displaced with a pet, as well as included SOS packs that have like charging bricks and things like that, so that once somebody's on the move, they have things just to keep them comfortable and show dignity to the entire family. So that's about it for me, unless anybody has any questions. We are still moving. We have 4 transports this week, by the way. Transport is still part of recovery, obviously, slower than normal, but there's at least 4 national organizations still trying to keep the numbers a bit down so that they're not having to euthanize for space. And we'll obviously continue to support those efforts.
Yeah, and Creator Get is just such a valuable resource in all situations, and those backpacks just sound amazing to, help both pets and their owners. And big kudos for all your continued support and efforts to work with both the government and NGO partners and kind of be that bridge or that hub, both for supplies, but also communication, because it does all tie together. And Robbie, we did have a question in chat for you. What type of shelters or type of facilities were being used as the pet-friendly shelters?
Are you talking about our state-run shelters?
Yeah, do you know what kind of buildings or facilities they are in?
Okay, so one of them is at Houghton. That's our own facility we have district offices across the state, and those are where, we train our shelter teams, and so that's at our complex. It's in a hard structured building, a metal building with air conditioning. Then when you go to Bastrop, it was Morehouse Activity Center, so it's a big arena type facility. At Dixon Correction, it's a correctional facility. They have a brick and mortar shelter there with a full vet clinic supported by LASART during the events for a veterinarian. And then Lafayette was at the Blackham Coliseum, and it was like a show barn. But we set up there for about 50 to 100 animals, and we didn't receive a one. But what happens in our state, they're called transitional sheltering. So they'll pull them into the mega shelters, to get them out of harm's way. And then after that, they'll start transitioning them further south back home toward their home parish so they can start going home to repair their houses and their property. So we do move shelters if we have to. Then after that, if the Red Cross takes it, they went under the under the animal control facilities in that parish. Not necessarily in those facilities, but facilities that they've picked out, and then they're watched by the animal control directors or employees. So they're co-located.
Great.
Yeah, we didn't use any tents
Yeah.
this time. We've used tents before, but We didn't have to use any tents. Lamar Dixon is also a transition shelter for us, but we didn't have to open it. Did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you. And the sheltering aspect, and we'll kind of this is kind of a preamble to another discussion point we'll get into as we change the sheltering models a little bit of that pre-event, get people out of the way versus post-event recovery, and how we're supporting people that may not have power and having heat issues, and what that did to some of your request chains. But before we get to that point, from the field aspect and from the nationals, I didn't see Josh and Shannon. Shannon went live with IFA. IFA is still deployed for recovery, and Josh just got back home from American Humane. But since I was with them at the beginning of the deployment, remember the NGOs or the national partners, even though we have not been officially deployed yet, many times we are moving resources around to make sure that if we get a call to stage or get a call to deploy, that we are somewhat ready to go. Now, none of us will move unless we have an official request or a mission statement from a partner to have authority to be in that disaster space, whether it's pre-event or during the event. And that's important for our emergency management partners to know and understand that please don't assume that we're in your state unless you have called us. And so good communication, pulling the trigger ahead of time to get us at least into a staging point is really important to make sure that the resources are available when you're ready for them. And it gives us the opportunity to actually pull our resources together, because as Denise mentioned, with COVID in play, many of the national resources, we still engage volunteers over employees or contractors, and some of those volunteers may not be available for a variety of reasons during the pandemic. So we do find ourselves stretched at this time. But finding a suitable staging area then for us worked out great. Robbie offered up the LDAF offices in Baton Rouge, which was a fantastic place because it was on generator power. It was on the edge of driving distance for most of us to get into the impact zones and be able to have a relief area for our people to come in with lots of vehicles, our temporary housing, and logistics and support. So as you think about where you're bringing people to or where you're bringing supplies to, picking out that centrally located and easily accessible and secure staging point was really important. Let's transition a little bit more as we, yeah, go ahead.
Can I mention something? I want to share
You
this with
bet.
the group. Once our commissioner gave us the permission to activate all our MOUs with the national groups, LaSart's had already been activated. She folds in real quick, and they want to make sure they get all their veterinarians that are going to volunteer in line and to support all the missions needing veterinarians. But I remember the conversation when I sent everyone an email, and then you and I spoke on the phone, and you said, we're going to stage, and you told me where. I forgot where it was right now. And I said, wait, you can stage here. I was thinking, I don't want you in Kansas. I want you here, so we can activate you quickly. And there was a pause in your voice, and you said, oh, okay, great. And then it wasn't long, and y'all started pulling in. I felt so relieved. So that was just fun, because when you're mentioning staging, and I was like, why would you stage anywhere else but here? It was just kind of a funny thought with the way you acted when I say, come here.
Yeah.
And Robbie, what
No,
you mentioned,
it was great.
Yeah.
This is Beth. Robbie, what you mentioned, that word relief, that is that's the perfect word. I know we talked to all our national partners also beforehand, and all of you guys, y'all, we're willing to help if needed. We just cannot thank you enough for all you do to support the states and what we do. I mean, literally, relief is the word. Just to hear your voices and know you will help when needed. We really appreciate it.
And this is the thing. When I sat down and the commissioner asked me, what our needs are, and I started thinking that, we, the Department of Ag, in our mission, we probably don't need the national groups, but our parish animal controls and our parish OEPs and the citizens in those parishes do. And so I wanted to make sure that if these animal controls that have MOUs or failed to have them, that we would have those resources readily available, staged here at Baton Rouge, where we could deploy them as needed. And it was a relief.
And it worked really, really well. Hey, Aaron, Susan Anderson, who's the Director of Disaster for ASPCA, is on the call. And can you give her co-host ability so she can join the panel for the ASPCA? And while Aaron's getting Susan her authority that she can unmute, let's talk a little bit about as we're getting into teams arriving. And Susan, you're able to unmute yourself now. How was ASPCA working on mobilizing all your different efforts from transports to field response?
Sure. Appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the panel today. So the ASPCA had boots on the ground as of August 29th, and we've been there continuously since then. But the first steps, like we talked about earlier on the panel, were pre-evacuation efforts, and we did have our transportation, relocation, and placement department assisting with transporting animals out of the areas that anticipated heavy damage from the storm and moving them to various placement partners that we have. So that was a big initial push from our perspective. And then we had field teams, a small field team that staged after picking up equipment at our warehouse near St. Louis and heading south. We staged for a few days and sent teams in as we were able to find lodging, which proved to be very, very challenging for us. And we, of course, collaborated with your group, Eric and IFAW, initially to do some water operations, search and rescue, field assessment type operations, just to try to get an idea of what the overall scope was of the damage and the need down in several parishes.
Yeah, it's always great to have partner organizations like ASPCA and IFAW and American Humane all working together with Code 3. And one of the things that really was fantastic again about at the staging area LDAF is when requests came in through government channels, we were right there and Robbie could say, hey, come to my office. I want you to listen to this along with getting the web EOC requests. To go support the parishes, but there's also, there's always there's actually multiple lines of communication going on during a disaster, but we get requests coming two different directions, one through our government channels and one through our non-governmental channels. And I'm going to use an example that New Orleans had with their SPCA where they were down ACOs. They did not have enough ACOs within New Orleans, and there was a push up through the state for an interstate request for ACOs. And Robbie, I'm going to have you talk about that in just a second. But that request also put out through non-governmental channels through the Association for Animal Welfare Professionals. I know I got that wrong. Sorry, it's the Association for Animal Welfare Advancement now. And it was a non-government request of, hey, if you've got participating agency ACOs that can come help, send them our way. And trying to create that transparency and keeping those lines working together, but still separate in their request chains could prove to be challenging. Robbie, can you talk about your advancement of actually requesting ACOs through your government channels during this event?
Yeah, sure. Several years ago, we started working with our animal control agencies to find a mechanism that they could request assets from the state if need be. And so we had a directors meeting with the GOSEF regional coordinators and OEP directors during the summer of last year, and we talked about the IMAC. So ASPCA was the first one to actually write an IMAC and ask for Lafayette, and we sent it out statewide to all the parishes. However, and the IMAC was perfectly written. It's just that the the parishes that wanted to send ACOs to them didn't know how to write the cost. So we did such good work, but then there was this glitch that they were worried how they were going to get paid. But anyway, Lafayette and EBR, East Baton Rouge Parish, they sent ACOs. The problem was it was perfectly orchestrated as far as getting the information out. They wrote the IMAC so that it detailed what they needed and for how long. The cost was omitted because no one knew how to cost it out or even invoice it out. But the problem is because of COVID and so many of our other coastal parishes were affected, only a few animal controls across the state could even sacrifice sending anybody, so we got, I think it was 2 that actually did activate on an IMAC request, and Lafayette was one of them to Terrebonne, and then EBR went to LASPCA. So we felt that was a success, but the MOU, the standard good old MOU, is probably still going to be your best mechanism to request assets with. But I'm proud that
Yeah, and congratulations.
Go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry.
No, you were right on it. We were proud to see that be successful as we, are really starting to push. And for all of our partners, remember that animal-related resource typing was approved through FEMA and published in 2018, and it talks about animal control officers, animal sheltering, and ASAR teams, et cetera, that you can start to put in mission-ready packages and actually make government requests. Now, each state's going to be a little bit different on how they define their terms and how they pay people. But one of the things that we see lacking is that we have boots on the ground resources. We have the push to actually be able to define and write those resources into requests that can go up to the state. But then we have agencies that don't know what to do with that. And how does that actually translate to boots on the ground in the functional paperwork, and how does middle management engage that? And so something to consider for our state partners and our government partners is a workshop that invites agencies and middle managers to come together and say, okay, let's practice how to do these requests. What does it mean when you send me 1 animal control officer in a truck or 2 animal control officers in a truck? And how long does it need to be? And really run through those actual scenario-based events where you're doing the paperwork. I will tell you, it's not the most fun, but having that IMAC, your interstate and EMAC capabilities requesting out of state, just opens up a whole new door of resources. So we felt, watching that happen in Louisiana was really some of the first of its kind, and was so excited to see that happen. And as we were going forward with the resource, yes, go ahead, Robbie.
This is the thing. I don't know about WebEOC in other states, but in ours, an IMAC is an parish to parish or agency to agency. It's not any out-of-state assets. But since I'm on the WebEOC, I don't have access to that board, that IMAC board. If I had access to it, I could temp it out and just get the average salaries or call their accountant or whoever it is at the parish and get those hourly rates. But that was the sticking point, is because we don't have access to it. It's an in-parish function. And the mission ready package was complete except the cost. And that's what the whole reason why we want to do these things, to make sure they get paid their salaries.
Yeah, and that falls right in line with this question in chat, Robbie. There's a question for you that says, does Louisiana have a standard job classification for IMAC, EMAC, EMA, et cetera, for ACOs to delineate between field officers, kennel management, water rescue, capable, et cetera? Does Louisiana have that as a state?
Well, we copied the ones that y'all did, those mission ready packages that FEMA did. Now, the only thing is I wrote one several years ago for our pet trailer, and then I wrote one with LASAAEP for their veterinarians if we take their vets and go somewhere with them. But that's the only ones that we've written.
And that's traditionally what we see is the states have adopted the FEMA typing. And for those that aren't familiar with this, if you just Google FEMA resource typing library tool, is the go-to, just search animal, and the animal resource typing, related animal resource typing will come up, and it'll have definitions for animal control officers and ASAR teams and the requirements behind what each of those different type teams are. And just for an example, a type 3 team for ASAR is going to be a dry land team that basically can supplement an animal control unit. Type 2 adds in water, and then type 1 adds in additional rope skills and hazmat. Remember, the hazmat piece is really getting to be quite a hot topic, no pun intended, especially with the oil spill out in California. And our partners at animaldecon.com have been working with the military and some other decon groups across the country to help get the word out that ACOs and animal welfare professionals need to have their 24-hour training to be able to respond to animals in hazardous incidents. And so when local animal control started to get calls about oil birds from the oil spill and injured wildlife, they weren't allowed into the disaster area because they didn't have their hazmat certs. So across the board, that has become a really big issue. And one of the other questions, that we saw from Yvonne as we get into the response phase of this, and not to hurry things up and jump ahead too far, but can anybody talk about, and this can come from the NGO side or the government side, talk about what you were hearing with groups that were just self-deploying into parishes without authority to be there? Can anybody take the lead on that?
Well, I just want to say one thing. In our animal control directors meetings this past year, we had several of them, including with the LaSART boot camp. And Gina Truxler hosted two trainings, and we had the OEP directors on as well. But one of the discussions were road groups, and we have spoke with our attorneys, and we thought the best way to manage that would be to make sure there's either an emergency rule by the parish or an executive order by the parish president stating in public, on Facebook and everywhere and in writing, that people who are not authorized to come into their parish to do pet services, if you're not approved by the animal control, you're not allowed. That gives them power to litigate when these people come in and take people's pets. So if in this event, this was one of the first that everywhere you looked on Facebook, the animal control director or agency was posting out there, if you come into this parish, you need to be approved to respond, and if not, you're not welcome. So it was like the first time in my history that I've seen it across the board with all the agencies putting out the same message.
Yeah, absolutely. And that worked really well across the board because there were stories of self-deployed groups that came in, and it was primarily after authorities had gone through on the primary search of the disaster area and roadways were cleared. So you're thinking this is 5, 6, 7 days after the event, and people are starting to return home, and the flow of traffic reverses. And in that flow of traffic, you have the self-deployers. And it happens
Right.
every disaster. It's not isolated. Go ahead.
Well, I do know that one individual was escorted out by the sheriff's office. And that to me is monumental. That should have sent a message.
It really
there.
is.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, especially from down here, because people like to come here in unauthorized manner take people's pets. Well, when the sheriff's office starts escorting you out of the parish, I think it's going to go viral.
Yeah. And Denise, talk just a little bit about greater goods requirement for people to participate on greater good grants. You have a method of verifying that they had the authority to be there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, if they're an outside, most of the time they come through social media or a donor. So like the donor will be getting asked for a truckload of food or vaccines or things like that. And then the other one is, an ad hoc disaster group. The first thing we ask for, is, are you an invited party? They always lie. and say they are. And the next thing I ask for is their letter, and they always go crap. So it's pretty much shut down from the beginning. And then if they're assessed to be somebody that might be actually causing a problem, as in we think they might be stealing pets and things like that, then we roll them over and report to either the parish itself or Renee. And then we advise,
Yeah.
referred them to us why it is an invalid request.
And I think that's a great way of working with the system to really discourage the self-deploying groups. And we understand, being in the business, that there's very little way to stop the people to come in, take a few pictures, post it on Facebook, and
Right.
make a little bit of money because they're gone the next day. But a lot of efforts do happen both on the governmental and NGO side to try to discourage it. And it's always helpful when local law enforcement will stand behind or stand with animal services in getting those people located and out of the area. I will commend the local parishes. They gave anybody that did come in, they gave them the opportunity to work within the system. They didn't just automatically throw them out. They said, if you're a benefit, you really want to do things right, here's what I need you to do. And many groups came new. They were smaller groups, came new to this hurricane and wanted to learn the system. So there were some good stories out of teams that came down and didn't know how to help, but they really wanted to. And one of the questions in chat is how people can volunteer. And of course, we're always recommending people to start at home when you volunteer. Find your local animal response team or find your local state animal response team to start with. And then Aaron's done a great job putting in links to all the partners at the national level that have volunteer response groups, and that includes ASPCA, Code 3, American Humane, IFAW, Red Rover. All of us have places for volunteers, depending on how much time you have and how much training you want to do to become a credentialed responder. As we get into this last 20 minutes, let's talk a little bit about our response efforts. So requests were coming in, and something from a field standpoint that I thought was unusual, well, not unusual, but unique to the parishes in this particular event is everybody was pushing feed in place and try to shelter as much at home, that it wasn't all go gather everything and take it to a giant mega shelter where of course we have all sorts of issues with reunification care and whatnot. And Louisiana, did such a great job years ago when Robbie and her team developed the cohabitation toolkit. So we know keeping animals with their owners is the best option. And if we can safely shelter in place at home and support the local communities, it takes a lot of stress off of the sheltering infrastructure. Were there additional calls, and Beth, I can open this up to Mississippi too. Were there any calls coming in for Robbie, you and Beth, that were out of the norm or unusual this time besides supporting shelter and food drops?
Beth, you going? You want to go first?
Go ahead.
So if anything out of the ordinary, it's not out of the ordinary, but our animal controls had a good handle on all the Red Cross shelters that were co-located with pets, and they were supplying them with food and supplies, and doing daily checks of the facilities. There was an instance where a humane organization that was the unofficial sheltering agent for that parish intercepted some animals, but they were well cared for. We made contact with them, and the animal control director for that parish kept, visiting that humane group that took the animals in. But that's not normally common for us. But it happened. It had a good turnout because they were willing to take those 6 pets for this. The people were elderly, and so it worked out fine. But that's kind of, I guess that's what you're talking about, because it wasn't our norm, but it worked out perfect because once I talked to the parish administrator, he assured me that they were the sheltering agent for that parish. And how this worked was they were sheltering Lafourche's people and their pets in Assumption. And so the other group was the sheltering agent for Assumption, but it was all worked out well. but that was just something a little uncommon for us.
I don't think we had anything out of the ordinary in Mississippi. We did have, um, after the event, a good many animals from Louisiana that were being boarded in vet clinics along the state line in Mississippi. So we've been working with them to try to help with boarding costs, but through a grant with PetSmart Charities. And but it was nothing unusual really. Um, just a good many.
That's great. And Susan, I'm going to have you jump in with me on the field aspect. I know from Code 3, we watched the transition of types of calls coming in. So we had the surge calls right after the event. And then we started to transition into, now we're looking more for transport calls. And now we've got people coming home and we need food drops in areas where people can go to get food and supplies for their pets. And then we start to see that sheltering because power's not on, and how can we support sheltering that may be a 30-day event. And now we're getting into recovery of, okay, now we're starting reunifications. These shelters are starting to empty. Susan, for ASPCA, you guys have a large scale ability to provide a variety of services. And I mean scale as large amount of services, not large amount of people for services. But how does that change your priorities as a director for setting people up in your supplies and your logistics to watch these phases come through?
Sure, and I'm glad you clarified the having a lot of response capability, not necessarily a lot of people on staff, although with our response partners and volunteers, we were able to deploy approximately 90 people to date down to Louisiana for this response. But you know, we would have regular conversations about what our resources were, and it was a constant shuffling and constant discussion and evaluating what the needs were. Conversations with the folks on the ground, with our partners in the different parishes, and with our own internal partners that have different capabilities. But since we do have state and other governmental partners on this call, just to give everybody an idea of what you know, this amazing effort that we did together with IFAW, Code 3, and American Humane, we were able to provide services in multiple parishes all at the same time. We estimate that we have assisted, and I mean, all of us together on the ground have assisted more than 1,500 animals, whether it was with direct rescue or with other support services such as sheltering, feeding in place, food distribution, relocation and placement, providing subject matter experts on the ground and remotely, and other supplies and equipment. So I mentioned that we had deployed 90 people, but combined with IFAW and the other groups that deployed for this incident, I don't know what the total number was, but the number of animals assisted is pretty astounding, and we're really pleased with it. And we couldn't have done it without this collaboration that we formed.
Yeah, without a doubt. And keep in mind for the national teams, you know, I think it's been a great transition over the years, is that we used to be thought of as a silver bullet to come in and solve all problems. And over the years, we've really tried to help build local capacity and capabilities to handle things. And we provide just smaller support teams, because many of our teams across the national board, we're still supporting fires out in California and in other states. Some teams were supporting cruelty cases in other shelters, and other teams had other obligations that they couldn't get their folks away, on top of dealing with a pandemic. So we're not just dealing with one event across the country, it's multiple events all the time, everywhere, that we're working on from a national aspect. We're running down to our last 10 minutes, folks, so I want to jump ahead and talk a little bit about the accountability and reporting piece. Because it really is, in my view, as an executive director and somebody that works on state and federal levels, the after action reports are really important to see. And we all know that if the accountability isn't there from day one and the reporting isn't there at the end of the event, it's very difficult to show that there was ever an animal need. And if there's never showing an animal need, nothing is going to change as far as resource allocation. And so that accountability really needs to happen all the way down from the paperwork to the shelter, all the way up to NGOs and partners reporting appropriately to the government partners what they did and what they saw in the field. And I'll open this up to our government partners. Do you feel your systems are adequate, or are there things that you'd like to see enhanced, or are there things that partners can do to really give you a better platform for accountability and reporting?
Well, Eric, for us, the way we activated our MOU with you guys, all of you, but when the requests started coming in, we released our assets to them, to the parish, and y'all became under their control and command. So it was up to the parishes to document, everything, or y'all document everything that you did for each parish. I just felt because of us not having enough operations chiefs to go down to each parish to manage the response, it was best to do it that way. And that way you're actually working for that parish government and you're accountable to them, not to me or not to the Department of Ag. I just think that's a better way for us to operate, and I'm pleased with it. And mind you, every day all of us talked. We got a brief every day of what's going on, and then in the mornings I usually came back and circled the wagons with y'all and just kind of gave y'all a heads up of what might be coming down the pipe. Did that work for you, Eric?
It did. That worked really well. And I thought the modes of communication between parishes and state was excellent throughout Louisiana and throughout this event. And I think one of the things that we continue to work on at our field level, in both ASPCA and ASAR have been trying to develop better ways to account for our teams in the field using software. And we're in the middle of beta testing some things where ASAR teams or animal control officers can use technology if they have connectivity in the event to drop a GPS pin, take a picture of an animal, take a picture of the property, fill out information, incorporate owner information, and then upload that to the EOC. So potentially an emergency manager or an ESF 11 coordinator could actually see in real time what the ASAR teams or what the field teams are doing. And at the shelter is that technology can just be used to account with shelter numbers. As mentioned at the first of the program today, is there are some reporting challenges in American Red Cross shelters, potentially if they're not counting animals. So whether that means that we have to delegate an assessment team to go to mass care facilities to double check on animals, or whether there's another mechanism of reporting to incorporate with those numbers, and then getting the word out of how to actually push that information around. We could have shelters having fantastic metrics and being accumulated all this data, and they don't know how to report it accurately to the right individuals for the right reports. And that means everything from the shelter director to the county emergency manager to a regional emergency manager, all the way up to the state. So there's a variety of levels that information needs to be transparent and readily available, but we haven't hit that really golden ticket for what that could be for a standardized system. So every state that we go into, every county that we go into, we always ask what their mechanism of reporting is, and it may be paper. We may be filling out 214s with pen and pencil and turning those in for a dispatch mission for the next day where it's written on a piece of paper, and technology's not working. Or there's the use of all sorts of apps now where somebody said, okay, we're using Trello boards, or we're using Slack, or we're using another communication app to bring everybody together. I personally, whatever it is, as long as it works, I'll be happy to use it. And if that's what they're used to doing, if not, we continue to work together on the national front to try to come up. And that includes, working a new partner at NARSC is Petco Love. And Petco has some great facial recognition software that they're working with. And hopefully we can incorporate that into our field teams eventually to, create a better field working environment to enhance our reunification and keep animals out of the shelters. I'm getting into the last 5 minutes here, and this is for the entire board, and I'll thank you now for your participation, for Susan, Denise, Beth, and Robbie. What, if any, is the last lesson learned or the most important point you'd like to convey to the group today? And let's just start with Beth. I'll put Beth on the spot first. What's your biggest takeaway?
I appreciate that. I think for us, like working on the reporting, getting the numbers in, and doing a daily sit rep is very important for us to keep the information together to send into the branch journal for MEMA, which goes on up to the governor. So our biggest lesson learned is we need to get better numbers on the animals, but to incorporate in our daily sit reps.
Great, thank you. Robbie, biggest lesson learned or helpful advice?
I think the helpful advice I have to share with you is develop those relationships and make it easy for people to say yes. Because if you make it easy,
I love it.
That's my mantra for today.
Robbie, you always have a better
great.
answer. I always like your answers much better. I say ditto to
Next
that.
time, go behind me.
Yeah, I want to go second next time.
Okay,
Oh,
I'll make sure. I love it. Miss Denise, any words of wisdom from Greater Good?
I think I said them. I mean, I think it's just, again, that everybody keep in mind that we're all operating in a pandemic and it's slowing us all down. So the need to be prepared and think ahead, like have your trucks moving. If you can see something coming at you, keep things in stock. Like we made sure people have vaccines still, just in case another storm hits. Like really stay ahead of it, and communicate as effectively as possible. We constantly are checking in with our other national partners to make sure that not too much funding is going to someone and someone's getting overlooked. Because it's really a stressful time for animal shelters in general that are understaffed and struggling because of the pandemic, and we just want to make sure no one falls through the cracks.
Perfect. And Susan from ASPCA, any last words of wisdom?
Well, Robbie already touched on the importance of relationships, and I'll build on that is just having preparedness and having your plans in place well in advance of a disaster striking. And I'm sure that the A and any of our NARSC partners and other partners are more than happy to work with any states, counties, other jurisdictions that need help in that way. Just reach out to any of us, and we'd love to assist you in any way we can. And we are also offering disaster response grant money that can be used for preparedness, as well as direct response or recovery.
Fantastic. And I'll echo what Leanna Tucker from Florida just wrote in chat. Great work, Louisiana, Mississippi. Proud to have you as a partner in the Southeast. And that echoes from all the national partners. Miss Erin, I'm going to throw it over to you because I got to jump onto a podcast. Do you have any parting words for NASAAEP?
No, thank you all. And I tried to list any of the organizations mentioned in the chat. If you would like to save the chat, just go ahead down to those 3 buttons on the side of the chat and click Save Chat, and you can have those for later. Again, thanks to all our panelists today, and thanks to everybody for their hard work in animal response. I hope you all have a great afternoon.